He is part of the Fox Sports Radio Alumni Association. Mike Mayer, producer now for Pac-12 Radio on Sirius XM, channel 373. He's also got a great podcast. Check it out, OT Mike Wrestling. He is on Twitter at OffTheMic28. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley, and I'm at Fox Sports Radio as an anchor. Mike, it has been a long time coming. You came at a great time because we have a lot to talk about as far as some exciting news in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy time. This has been a long time coming because we never crossed paths at Fox Sports Radio, but a lot of the same people I do. Apparently, I was well liked. I mean, I did my job. So that's positive, and I obviously keep in touch with a lot of people over there. But it's great to finally meet you virtually. But
it's a start.
It's a start. But yeah, I mean, it's Fox Sports Radio has always been in my blood. I mean, it started my career as an intern 7 years ago. So no, it's kind of crazy and it's really a big part of where I am now. So.
Yeah. I want to ask you about that a little bit later as far as the time at FSR and how that formed your skill set and helped vault you to the position you are now. But the first thing I wanted to get to, this breakthrough development that took place in the Pac-12 as they push to return to play. Now, essentially, Commissioner Larry Scott came out on a Zoom call yesterday, and he announced with a lot of excitement this medical breakthrough. And essentially, it is a rapid test on site where when it comes to COVID-19, 15 minutes, it's all it's going to take for you to get a result. Now, this is humongous, Mike, as far as getting guys back onto the field, whether we're talking football or any other fall sport. And look, there's been a lot of pushback about the conference's decision to postpone the fall season. But when you hear this news around the Pac-12 radio hallway, and you can understand the excitement coming out of Larry Scott, what's the temperature around the Pac-12 radio when you've got some medical breakthroughs as far as testing that could lead to us getting back on the field sooner rather than later?
Well, the whole thing is this journey in the last 6 months has just been wild to me because you go back to March when we got shut down. I was one of the last studio shows that we had, and we've been at home pretty much since March 16th. And this was right after the NCAA tournament got canceled. So we were all under the expectation that we were going to play. And then obviously certain things were done and just everything got in the way. And August 11th, season's postponed. So we were bummed, and it was terrible because when we heard what was happening, especially my fellow producer, Dan Lynch, all my hosts, we went on and we were still recording shows. Now we're back live, and we were just reacting to this news, and it wasn't doom and gloom or anything. We kind of expected it. It's just that and you know this from being at UCLA and covering them.
Sure.
The Pac-12 in terms of visibility, and even going back to when we went to conference only, it's they need visibility and they need the opportunities to be successful and get to that college football playoff level, and it hasn't been there in football in the last couple of years. So when it went to conference only, and then when it went to the season being postponed, we were bummed because Ohio State, Oregon, USC, Notre Dame, USC, Alabama, Michigan, Washington, those games were gone. And those were opportunities for me as a guy covering at Pac-12 Radio and just for the national audience to really see how great these teams are, because there's just Pac-12 after dark. Nobody cares on the West Coast. Nobody's watching. So when this testing thing came up, I was like, man, this is huge because the Pac-12 is at the forefront and things have obviously changed. They're at the forefront of this major breakthrough, and it leads to an opportunity for them to really drive home and for them to be able to play again. Now, I don't know if that's going to mean it's going to happen this year, but I'm really hopeful. And I'm also hopeful that the Pac-12 actually gets some sort of credit for this. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back being a Pac-12 radio employee, but it feels like all the news has been around the Big Ten. The Pac-12 is they had a 12-page release, told everybody, hey, this is why we're canceling. This is why we're postponing. And then they moved on. And the Big Ten, it's just been this nonstop parade of just all these all these people barking back at Kevin Warren talking to the president. And it's like the Pac-12's just been sitting there and they've been silent. Some people have been saying, okay, they just don't care. I was like, look now. They were looking at it. They were looking into this testing development, and that's great. And especially considering Larry Scott's one of the most scrutinized commissioners in this league, for him to come up with this and be able to generate this, it shows they really want to make this happen. And I'm excited because I've always been kind of skeptical of the idea of going back on the field without rapid testing because you just don't know. Now with this, when they're going to be in September, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, you could essentially trump any outbreak from happening. And this goes beyond sports too. Like this is something that will be able to be used in society and help open up our economy. You can locate that transmission right away, isolate those folks, and then continue to move on. And I noticed you brought this up on Twitter as well, Mike, and there was a lot more pushback, or people were looking at the Pac-12 like, why aren't they rejecting the notion? Or their fans weren't doing a whole lot of chirping on social media about a lack of a season. And that apathy played into a narrative, oh, nobody cares about the Pac-12.
Right.
But here's how I look at it, and this is kind of what you were saying. While everybody was looking at the Pac-12 like nobody cares, or they just accepted their fate of not having the season without putting up much of a fight, they were like Michael Jordan in the gym working out when nobody was watching them, like refining their game, going to this lab, and it's the Quiddle Corporation, and getting all up to speed on this rapid testing, daily testing development. And when it seems like everything is documented in social media, when anything that has any sort of advancement is leaked, for this to be kind of kept hush hush for so long, and then all of a sudden to come out, it's like you said, it's kind of like the Pac-12 is dunking on their doubters. And Larry Scott brought this up. He was on, I saw on the Dan Patrick Show this morning, and you brought this up, Mike, where, look, it would be great to have it as far as the football season starting in January. He went on to say that it's possible that it could play even sooner. And then there was this quote retweet from Cal quarterback Chase Garbers.
Yeah.
Did you see that? Where he said, "You better not be messing with me, Larry." What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I do think it's possible that we could get football before the end of the year. But the key is, what people need to understand is these machines aren't going to be at Pac-12 campuses until the end of September.
True.
So, in the end, like, I know there's been a lot of conversation about the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. Some people are thinking the Big Ten's waiting for the Pac-12 or the Pac-12 is waiting for the Big Ten. Here's the reality. You need 6 weeks to get ready for a season. You need at least 6 weeks to get ready and ramped up for a season. So that probably puts us at November, the Thanksgiving timeline that was written. October 10th was never going to happen. Like it never was. It's wishful thinking. I know everybody wants football, but I get Chase Garber's excitement, and plus Cal was going to be really good this year with even with Evan Weaver leaving. But yeah, Justin Wilcox, we've had him on a bunch on Pac-12 Radio. Great coach. He's really done a great job at kind of revitalizing Cal into like something of meaning in the Pac-12 North, and obviously Oregon's there too. Like, so it was going to be an interesting season for Cal. So I understand why Garbers is super excited about this. Larry Scott's leaving it out there for the possibility. I think we're going to get basketball before we get football, because basketball seems like that's one where you can put them in a bubble. And there's been talk about, okay, we can maybe get if we get these testing things in order, then that seems like more of a realistic option. But in all honesty, I hope we get football before the end of the year. This announcement makes me feel a lot better than I did 3 weeks ago when they postponed the season. And the counter would be to all of this is, okay, Pac-12, why didn't you just kick the can down the road if you knew that, okay, 23 days later, you're going to be making this breakthrough announcement in testing? It's like, we're still trying to figure this thing out. So, like, I get the narrative of why people are like, okay, let's bag on the Pac-12 because you know what, they're the inferior conference to everybody else. But in all honesty, like they were ahead of the game on this whole thing. And so Larry Scott has the right to be optimistic here because, hey, and it also begs the question, it's like, hey, if you're this optimistic, why can't we get on the field in November, December, right?
Yeah. There was the guy that was in charge of this corporation that is spearheading this rapid testing. He said that while other conferences haven't taken it as like a full conference initiative, he said that there are several other schools around the country that are going and looking at this rapid testing and wanting to use it. So the question is going to be, why not every conference now dive into this? And I think Larry Scott said something like, we're going to hopefully help those other conferences that are interested, introduce them to this medical breakthrough. And like you said, the bubble experience, what I've heard is that they don't want just like a bubble experience as far as just student athletes, but like if they could bubble like football games, like they could have, or basketball games, I should say, where they would have like a one central location and then they would have several schools, like playing each other like that.
The pods. Yeah. I know
like
John
a pods.
Wilner said, like John Wilner said something about this. He was a regular guest on our channel where basically you would have, because in the Pac-12 where the way it's structured is you would have like UCLA and USC would go out to play Oregon and Oregon State.
Yeah.
So they would have like a central hub, maybe in Vegas, maybe you could do it there and just house them. Maybe go have them play at MGM or have them play at T-Mobile. And then you could just basically have those games, those two individual games with those four teams, just get them done. Just get them done in the central, or have them go up to Corvallis and just have them stay in a hotel, like in the same like central location. So like that's something that was really interesting to me, and it's been proven with the NBA bubble. No positive tests. They've kept it clean. They've kept it healthy. It's much harder to do with football because those teams are way bigger, but it's just way easier to keep in control like these basketball rosters where there's like 15 guys that you're really about and it's a bunch of assistant coaches and stuff. So to me, basketball seems a lot more feasible to start before the end of the year, as I said, but football, like if this testing works, and the key is, and I've said this on a couple of radio shows, I went on with Bertie Fratto last week where you need to get the teams on the field. That's the other thing that people are missing with this. It's like the testing is great, but you also have UCLA, USC, Cal, and Stanford can't even get on the field because of health restrictions. And Larry Scott was very particular about public health. And Oregon and Oregon State, I don't think can get on the field either. So that's another big thing of the piece of this puzzle. If that gets cleared relatively soon, then yes, I think maybe Thanksgiving, December is a real possibility for the Pac-12 to play football this year.
Mike Mayer is with us, producer at Pac-12 Sirius XM Radio. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. And Mike, there are discussions about college basketball November, December, January. So that'll be very interesting to figure out when the Pac-12 has to make a decision here. Perhaps it's in October or whenever they'll, kind of, that's sort of the mutterings that I've heard. And I'm sure you certainly have heard as well.
The same. Yeah.
Yeah. On a football front though, and you said the optimism is certainly coming forth. I saw Oregon State head football coach Jonathan Smith talked to reporters recently, and he said he was vouching for or trying to push for a sooner rather than later approach. He liked January, early February as a start date for Pac-12 football and wasn't really a fan of anything that lingered into March or April, May. He said that could create some problems. Pat Forty went on Paul Feinbaum today and sort of laid it out as well. Start in January for Pac-12 and then have the rapid testing and then have like a Rose Bowl game between the Big Ten and the Pac-12. What do you think about that possibly being a reality? And do you think that is a credible opportunity that is being discussed?
I know people will probably diminish that possibility because of, they're still going to have a college football playoff. Sure. But if that's the best case scenario, I'm all for it. And I've talked to coaches too. We had Kyle Whittingham on our channel. We've had David Shaw. David Shaw calls it winter football. And they were the same way as Jonathan Smith. It's like, hey, if you start in January, we can't get this past March or April because Kyle Whittingham put it to me and our show that if you go further past that, you're compromising fall 2021. And that's the number one thing. Like, it's great that you can play football, right now, obviously there's some challenges, but if it's going to affect, because I know the biggest thing is like how many games are you going to play in one season, because like these are college guys, and Brian, you're around student athletes all the time, so like their tolerance for, and especially in a sport like football and punishment and just being able to take that, like if you're talking about playing 20 games in a year, that's asking a lot. So Kyle Whittingham, David Shaw have been saying like 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 games is the most reasonable option if we go to the fall. So I think we've been misrepresenting this idea of spring football in terms of it should be more winter football, because realistically, if you're going to get a season in and you're going to push it back and you're going to talk about like, and I'm hopeful that we get something near the end of the year, November, December, because then maybe that opens more room for them to, carry on. And a lot of that's going to depend on what the Big Ten does, because I think they're going to want to be hand in hand because of what you said. The idea of having a second Rose Bowl between the Big Ten and Pac-12, that would just be badass, man. that would be so awesome to see, because first off, I think the Rose Bowl game is the best bowl game no matter what the championship game is. I grew up in Southern California. Been here every year but one. The Rose Bowl game, I always look forward because of the pageantry. Like I've talked to people and I've worked with people who've played in it. It's just different. So and I know it would be different, obviously, having it in a setting, but it's always been Big Ten, Pac-12 anyway, right? So, like, I'm all for that. And I hope that, I hope that we don't compromise 2021 in terms of, like, the fall, because that, to me, like, obviously you want to play, but these coaches, they're already thinking about, like, the next season. And if you're talking about playing 2 seasons in the span of, 10, 12 months, like it's not fair to the student athletes. And it's just like, you obviously have off-season training. It's just like, there's so many things that go into this. And that's why this whole thing has been so confusing to figure out, because on one end, a lot of people want to get football on the field because, hey, in reality, I think everybody kind of sort of has this in the back of their mind. It's like, yeah, if you drag this out any longer, it's just not going to work, because then you're compromising a lot of individual things across like a lot of conferences.
And so much of this, like you pointed out, is reflective on what the local governments say about what teams and what schools are able to practice and get on the field. And the California Pac-12 schools and in Oregon, they're still in a stalemate right now. It appears that the trends are looking promising. I don't want to speak too soon, but hopefully if we can continue in this direction, that some of those barriers will be lifted. And hey, we could have 2 Rose Bowls. And I feel like that's an interesting chunk of time as far as TV viewing, because you only really have basketball. So I think there would be a hunger for football at that time. And I know you'd have the NFL and you'd have playoffs and stuff like that, but there is such a hunger for football that could be showcased. And if you have the Pac-12, you're going to probably get more national games during that window anyway.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Which would look great on the conference in the long run.
We even talked about this today on my show. It's like, these open windows, like when you're not going, because what's been I said this earlier on, visibility. That's been the biggest problem. Pac-12 After Dark is a fun, hashtag for like the diehards, but like casual football fans, they're not watching Pac-12. They're not staying up at 10:30. Like I lived in the East Coast last year. I lived in the East Coast last year, and it's a pain in the ass to stay up at 10:30 at night to watch a college football game for 4 hours, because it's going to be like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So not a lot. And there was this conversation last year about Pac-12 going at 9 a.m. kickoffs. Like, that's right. They're all because of the big noon kickoff and like these prime slots. It's like a lot of those 12:30 Pacific or 9 a.m. Pacific time. Those are the prime real estate opportunities, or even like the 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock Eastern slot. Very rarely do you see Pac-12 games in there. So I'm with you. Like in terms of like visibility, it means a lot. I don't know what it's going to do for the state of the league in terms of like, they're kind of like, it's always been SEC, Big Ten, and Big 12. And then you've also got, I'm blanking on the SEC, Big 12, and Big Ten, and then
Big Ten,
and then the ACC.
ACC,
Well, because
yeah.
and the reason why I kind of blanked on ACC because really it's been Clemson, and that's really become a basketball conference with Duke and North Carolina. So,
Sure.
like Clemson's been carrying that conference, and one of my best friends is a Florida State fan. If he watches this, he'll probably be mad at me for saying that. The Florida State is still great. I believe in Mike Norvell, but it's like those four conferences have always been like considered ahead of the Pac-12. So I don't know if doing this, if that's going to really change anything, but having the visibility and the availability of those slots to just have people on the screen, that's big for the Pac-12, and that'll be good for recognition. But yeah, I think that the problem will still always be when it comes to like all five conferences playing, that could still wind up being an issue. But like I said, having your own set of eyes on you, that doesn't hurt. It could help. I don't know.
Yeah. Mike Mayer with us, producer, Pac-12 Sirius XM Radio. Follow him on Twitter at OffTheMic28. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. I know Mike Leach is not in the Pac-12 anymore, but don't ask him about those early kickoff times. You know how he thinks about that. And let's not forget if Hawaii is playing and how that adds to the craziness.
I mean, that was like one of our teams when I was on the Jonas Knox show. Where
that brought me on.
I actually have he went to Hawaii, and as a show gift, he got me a Hawaii T-shirt. And Nick Rolovich, former coach, a favorite of Jonas, he's now the coach of Washington State. So it's like it all comes together, Bryan.
Well, and that was my way of segueing, bringing up Hawaii. And I was like, you know what, Jonas, let's go from Jonas. Let's talk about your career in Fox Sports Radio. And I had Jonas on. It was really, really special and heartwarming to hear him open up about his struggles and how he waded through the business despite the obstacles. You and him have had a really profound relationship. What is it about him that has influenced you the most in your life, but also as a radio career and what you're doing in this industry?
Well, for one, his work ethic is second to none. And I think anybody you talk to about Jonas will tell you that he is one of the hardest working human beings in the radio industry, period. Like it's not, to me, it's not even close. The way he preps, the way he gets in and out of segments, how professional he is, how he carries on. Like, I mean, obviously on the air, like we goof off and we have a great time, but in terms of how he structures everything and how he puts it into it, it's second to none. And for me, just as a guy who was getting into the radio business, and like I had been at Fox Sports Radio for a couple of years as an editor before I got the opportunity to produce. He was the first show I worked on, his overnight radio show, the Jonas Knox Show, from 11 to 3 Pacific. And so like I didn't know him when I got in. And the crazy thing was, it's like he just took me under his wing. He's like, I mean, he always would tell me, hey, the goal for you is to get off of this show because you want to work on you want to work on better shows, and you want to be, because he was all about like helping me. It wasn't about his ego or anything like that. He was always wanting to, and any producer you could talk to, anybody who's worked with him will tell you the exact same thing. He is all about helping the people around him and making them better. And like his work ethic, just his attitude of like, don't let people get to you. Because I was really serious when I first got into the business. Like I took a lot of things personally. If I screwed up, I beat myself up about it. And he would just tell me, hey, Mike, just don't worry about it. And like, if people were like being idiots on the internet about certain things or certain bits that we do, it's just like, just don't care about it. The reality is, and I think he said this in the interview with you, it's just like Twitter can sometimes just be like a giant black hole, and it can just swallow you in, and it just knock you down. And he has fun with it, and he messes around with people. He has a good time. He doesn't take things too seriously. And I've kind of adopted that to myself. I mean, obviously things are going to happen when you're producing a live show, but I've always kind of had this mindset of like, okay, look, in the end, we're out here to entertain people. We're out here to give them information, and we're also out here to have a great time for 4 hours. And especially in the middle of the night, when I was doing a show for close to 3 years, like 2.5, 3 years, like that was always the thing, is like, no matter what, we were all about just having fun and having a good time. And he opened so many doors for me in terms of just like he like even just the smallest things. It's just like he would give me a small piece of advice or just tell me one of the stories like how what on his path. And he's
Yeah.
been through it, and those things like influenced me because he had his own challenges. Like I had my own challenges in dealing with my career and in my life. So for it, and just him being he's never about him. That's the best thing I can say about him. And in order to really be successful in this business, and I know some people have egos, but you can never be all about yourself, because the people behind the scenes, and he understands this more than anybody because he's a former producer himself, is like, you're never going to get anywhere without that. And he was always about helping the people around him. He was a huge influence when I made the move to Sirius. I consulted him with what I was going to do. I consulted with him. I talked to him all the time about stuff. Hell, and then I just things like wrestling we text about, and just the concept of like opening a door for just a goofy segment, and I still do it with him for the big pay-per-view events with wrestling, which is another passion of mine. Like just having the ability to talk about that, even with like betting odds about SummerSlam or WrestleMania, like having the opportunity to do that, like just so many things that he did for me. And I could probably go on forever about it. I can't say enough about the guy. Like he's such a good person, and he's such a good dude. And like, I'm not, and he probably won't want me to say this because I've even tweeted at him about this, because he's all like, he doesn't like to get the gratification or anything like that. He doesn't want it to be about him. That's what I've said. So, but I wouldn't be where I am in my career right now without Jonas Knox, plain and simple.
That's powerful. And wow. Yeah. And it's so, for a man who's in his position where usually it's like me, look at me, I'm Fox Sports Radio, I'm a national host. He is like the complete contradiction to that.
Yeah, exactly.
He barely likes to be on social media because he loves what he does, but he doesn't like all of the
doesn't like all the media attention or anything like that. Like it's because like, and look, I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to out people in terms of like, but there's people like that all across the radio industry and the entertainment and the media industry, where it's all about the flashy contracts and everything like that. Jonas is just, he's a guy who wants to just go out there and entertain all of us. And he wants to help people around him get to the level that he is, because he knows better than anybody that it's hard to break in this business. He told you a story, and I've heard the same story too. Like where he was so committed to getting to radio, he drove out and went through a lot, and he was broke, and he was able to power through. And now, in my opinion, he's one of the best hosts that Fox Sports Radio has. And I hope that they give him a daytime time slot or whenever. I know obviously there's a lot of prominent people. They've got a heck of a lineup at FSR, but I just can't tell you, from being on his show, the way he approaches, he has very thoughtful and very informed and very great takes that aren't hot. Like they're actually well thought out. That's the thing. Like that, like obviously his work ethic behind the scenes and the stuff that you just don't see or from behind the mic, that's one thing. But the fact is, the prep that he puts in, the way he thinks these things out, the way he says them on the air, the way he delivers it, and just it's. And I don't understand why some people, because like, I know he retweets these, like he retweets. Like he retweets all the idiots who will just call him offensive names. I'm like, where the hell are you getting this from? Are you just like mad that like somebody's trying to give it to you straight and give it to you real? Because a lot of people in the industry, and it goes back into my whole pro wrestling thing, is like a lot of people in the industry, it's about like, throwing out a hot take or just, being on the side of something, being the heel, the bad guy, or being the good guy. It's about that. Jonas is himself. He's himself. Like, obviously it's a little bit like obviously in terms of like having a lot of fun with people, but those takes are him. And like, it's not something like artificial or anything that can be generated in a lab that's just thrown in front of you. He's himself.
And you can see, Mike, as a radio, personality in a sense with Pac-12. I know you do so much as a producer as well, but like you've been in the game long enough where you can tell if a take is like manufactured. Like you can tell
Still
if
pisses
it's
me off.
forced. It does. And it's like, it's just this shtick that you obviously can sniff through. And it's like, why are you doing this, man? It's obvious what you're doing, you don't really believe. And that's what I love about Jonas, is like, he's not a hot take artist. And he also used the metaphor of the hot take or the riff that takes place on social media as a WWE match, just.
Oh no, he's actually used WWE influences in his takes.
Like,
yeah. I remember he brought up Roman Reigns, who's now the Universal Champion in WWE. He's one of their biggest stars. Like, he's brought him up constantly in terms of, like, obviously his love for UFC, and there's a lot of UFC guys that bounce in between MMA and WWE or have like that sort of affiliation. Mm-hmm. But like he's not scared to, like, bring up. I forgot what the take was specifically, but he brought up Roman Reigns in something, in like one of actually he was having a feud with John Cena like years ago. Okay. And it was talking about like the whole narrative that they were trying to do in this storyline was, okay, John Cena is now this big Hollywood movie star. He's coming back. He's basically just trying to bury all the talent. He doesn't care. Like, and so he's coming back as the guy trying to take his spot. And Roman Reigns, like, basically John Cena says back to him, like, I'm still here because you can't do your job. And so I forgot what laid into it. I forgot where he tied this into it, but he used that promo to kind of escalate his point in terms of what he was talking about. And it's like me being in the producer chair and sitting in the room is like, man, you wouldn't hear that from a lot of like other radio hosts around the country in how they kind of approach their takes. And that's that leads into what I've been saying, is that like, he really thinks these things through. Like, it's not like a generated hot take just to get clicks. Like, it's really who he is. And like, that's just the best thing. One of the other great things that I can say about him is just, he's real. He's 100% real. And I know he'll probably watch this and he'll probably just tell you, man, just stop.
He'll start cringing.
Stop talking about me, Mike. I mean, but it's like I said, I'm not beating around the bush when I say, like, he influenced me a ton in terms of how I've progressed into going to DC, into coming back, into being, and we talk all the time about things that are going on. We've talked about, obviously, the Pac-12 related thing. I mean, it's just like I said, it's always been a great relationship and a great friendship, because I know I can always lean on to him for advice, because, as I've said, he knows better than anybody the trials and tribulations and the challenges and the struggles that you have to go through to get to the top in this business.
He also authors one of the best segments of radio that you will ever hear, Pro Wrestling or a Porn Star, when he goes on the
I'm amazed at some of those names. Seriously, like, he doesn't drop very many WWE names in those, but like, sometimes, I mean, some of them, like, he would put in, like, they were like independent stars, and I'd hear them and I would just laugh my ass off at some of them. It's like, but then I'm just amazed that some of these guys are pro wrestlers. Some of these, that game is that again, like, talking about pro wrestling and just bringing stuff like that, or bringing a concept like that. I mean, he's the best, man. He really is. Yeah.
For those who have not listened to him and are watching this, go listen to his overnight show, Friday, 11 p to 3 a.m. Pacific. That's where you will hear.
It's drive time in Bangladesh, man.
That is right. Yes. And it is morning drive. I guess it would be morning drive in Honduras. No, I don't know. But yeah. So his intelligence, his humor is on the grandest of stages, and people should definitely check out his work. How did you, Mike, get the opportunity first at Fox Sports Radio? How did the door open for you?
Okay, so I was an intern, and I kind of sort of mentioned this, like, about 2013. I had a friend at Cal State Northridge where I was going, And we had been back and forth. Said, yeah, I've been working at Fox Sports Radio, and a couple of guys had interned there. So I got the internship. Met Mike Lingard, Big Mike. I miss him.
Mike.
I miss him. And so I was an intern. I produced on a show that doesn't exist anymore, Loose Cannons, with Pat O'Brien and Steve Hartman. Steve Hartman's still there, obviously. He's obviously, because Steve Hartman's great. I mean, he's just an amazing talent, just a sports encyclopedia. So I worked with Sam Batesh, who now I think is doing some stuff at CBS. Great guy, huge impact on my career. And so I got to the end of my I think I did a semester at the end of college. So my senior year. So I did that until probably about April or May. I wrapped there. So then I went to a community college and I got a second term where I would just, I did mostly editing, and I just was so determined I wanted to get into the business because I had spent so much time in school. I didn't really do the one thing that you kind of are supposed to do, and that's internships. So that kind of was a little bit of a fault of mine. So I busted my tail. I did whatever I could. I mean, I did editing shifts in terms of like just learning from people like Joe Elliott, there's not Gavin Kinzel, who I know very well, Lee DeLapp, who's been there forever. Like those guys were there before me. And so I would just sit in the edit bay. I'd cut up just random stuff or whatever, and just would help out in any way I could. So I ended that in like late August. And so I said bye. I was working at Vaughn's at the time. And I actually haven't really said this story to very many people. But basically I was trying to get a job in radio because like I had been in my post at Vaughn's, where I'd been working in Delhi for like close to about the same amount of time I was at Fox, for about 5 years. So I was just like, I've been out of school. I got to get out. So I applied for a job in Portland. I think it was KFXX in, I don't know if that's still a station. And I didn't get the job. I interviewed on the phone. I talked to their program director. I never went up and saw them. So this week was weird to me because like about 2 days after I didn't get that job, I basically, before that, I had interviewed with Mike about a temporary part-time position. So I was really trying to get in terms of being an editor. So about a day or two after I found out I wasn't going to get the job in Portland, I was at work. I was washing dishes because I in the deli on a Friday night, and my phone rings, and Mike Lingard tells me, "Hey, we're going to hire you. You're going to start Monday." And so that was kind of crazy to me because they were short people, and it's just like, and then from there the rest was history. And the crazy thing was that like I worked for probably about a year because, like I said, I was applying for a temporary position. This was not so I was taking a swing at like, okay, maybe I could last through football season. We'll see. So I ended up leaving Bonds. I took the opportunity, and for basically the next year or so, I was working as a temporary employee at Fox Sports Radio. And so, and I grew into being like a really great editor. A lot of people loved the work that I did. I busted my tail. I'd always generate content. Some people kind of hated me because I sometimes would just pull way too much audio for people. And like, it was just like, I had this sense. It's just like, okay, if I hear something interesting, I'm going to try and get it to the update anchor for the shows. Sure. And I know obviously sound isn't as impactful. It's all about the opinions now in terms of like, especially on a network like Fox Sports Radio and that Sirius XM, we have Mad Dog Sports Radio, where former Fox Sports Radio legend JT the Brick used to be. So like he's now there, and it's just like, yeah, you want to have passionate opinions. But I was always like this guy who just busted my ass, did what I could, and then just like it sort of blossomed throughout that. I just let my work do the talking. And then that's ultimately how I got the opportunity to produce for Jonas, produce for the Fellas, produce for RJ Bell, produce for Andy Furman and Brian No, Chris Plank, Arnie Spanier, Aaron Torres. I'm probably going to forget people. I'm grateful for all those opportunities that I got, because it really started out of just like an opportunity that like, okay, we're just going to hire this kid for a couple months and take him through the Super Bowl and we'll see what happens. And look at me now. Like, I like, even if that was just the smallest opportunity, the biggest thing that I could say to anybody is, even if it's a small opportunity, go for it. Like, even if it means risking stuff, and like, we all have our challenges, but it's just like, you've got to go for it. And like, if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't taken the leap and taken that opportunity, even knowing that, hey, I may not have a job in February after the Super Bowl, if I didn't do that, I'm not where I am. And
That's amazing.
yeah, so like, it's crazy. And it's like, I'm grateful to Big Mike. I'm grateful to Annie Z. They were the ones who gave me the opportunity. And all I wanted was just a chance to prove myself. And every editing shift that I ever did, like, I never half-assed it. I never, I always gave it my all. Producing, same thing. So it's just like, to go from the internship 7 years ago, and then I'm basically getting hired after, like, I found out that I wasn't going to get a producer gig with next to no experience in Portland. Wow. So it's just like, that timeline was sort of crazy, where like 2 days before, I'm basically coming home and I get a call from the program director there, and they tell me, yeah, we appreciate your interest. We think you're very talented, but we're going to go another direction. And then 2 days later, Mike calls me up on the phone. It's like, yeah, we want to hire you as an editor. So, and that just blossomed into what you see now.
That's the thing about this business, Mike, and those that are listening and watching this that aren't in it, is that it really does test your nerves. And
you have no idea, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I've talked a little bit about, I've had one of my struggles, and a lot of us can relate, is like, I was having a really hard time. Like, I came from like a television background. Like, I was a sports anchor reporter in Memphis, moved back to California. I'm from San Diego, and I was having a really hard time. I was literally about to give up. And then I got this opportunity from UCLA, IMG, just by a blind email. They're like, hey, you should apply for this. Like, we have this coaches show opening. And I didn't think I was going to get it. I thought there were much more qualified people. And the last person that they saw, they were like, hey, what is this guy all about? And so grateful for that. And then I was literally, from there, I was about to, like, I don't know what else I was going to do, because that was only a part-time opportunity. So I was literally thinking of like, do I give up? And then I was at one of my most depressed states, other than like when my father passed away. And that was when Dan Byers sent me an email, and he said, hey, we have a couple shifts sporadically throughout the week that we'd love to ask you and talk to you about your interest in. And it's funny how it happens. Like, a lot of times, Mike, when you least expect it, like, right. Here you are at Vaughn's, like, and you get the call. And so people that want to get in this business, there's going to be a lot of up and downs, and you got to be able to just kind of hold on to the boat and ride with the waves, because if you hang in there long enough, you're a perfect example of it, it will pay off.
Oh yeah.
And the belief in and like you pointed out, first of all, you attacked every opportunity with passion, and that was seen. And then also the fact, Mike, that you believed in yourself. And that's sometimes what is the ultimate convincing factor for you to get an opportunity. How you carry yourself. Do you think, even if you don't have the experience, that you can take part in that role and fulfill those responsibilities, and to have the confidence to be a quick learner and a quick thinker, and then just attack it and learn on the fly? And like, the positives come from that mindset, I believe. It's yeah.
Yeah, no, I 100%. It's just like, yeah, I always operated like, when I was trying to pursue my career, it's like, yeah, I spent maybe a lot longer than I was in a retail job that, I wasn't very happy with. But in the end, I knew that, like, hey, I'm a talented guy. I'm smart enough. Yeah. I know a lot about sports. I mean, like, this is gonna. I mean, obviously, you want to keep telling yourself like it was gonna happen. Did I have some doubt? Yeah, of course I did, because like like I said, I ended that internship in August. I didn't hear from them until October, November, when I had the interview, and then when I ultimately got hired. So, like, just like, it's a crazy timeline, and this business is so weird where like you just don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of a lot. I mean, I hate making this tie, and it's kind of a lot like what's going on right now. You just don't know what's going to happen. Every moment's just going to like, something's going to change, and you just have no idea what's going to happen. And so it's kind of like, I've always kind of prone myself to be used to it. Like, especially like in every avenue of my life, I've always tried to just keep a positive mindset. It's something my grandfather always instilled in me, to just be like, hey, like, don't beat yourself up over everything. Just have a positive mindset, and just be true to yourself. And like, no matter every time I got knocked down, or every obstacle I had to go through, or how long I had to wait to get my opportunity, because with Sirius XM, it's the same thing. Like I had to wait for my opportunity at Sirius XM. There weren't college conference channels when years ago. Like, they just launched them like a couple years ago. So like, I had been in contact with Michael Mazinski, who's my boss now, for close to like a year and a half, 2 years, just saying, hey, you got anything there? I'm looking at options for me. And ultimately it got to be about September of 2018. And basically they were going to launch the Big Ten channel, and presto, they wanted to hire me. So it's just like, I had to wait, and it was frustrating, and it was hard, because like, hey, like, you want to have every opportunity to better yourself. And that was the biggest thing with me with Sirius, is to do something different and challenge myself. But sometimes those opportunities aren't there. So like I said, and another thing I get from Jonas is, don't give up. He's the best example of all of this, in terms of like, he could have given up when he had that story that he told you. He told me, like, he could have given up. He didn't. And look at him now. One of the best hosts at Fox Sports Radio. So like I said, it all ties back into him, where like, I've kind of just adapted to, like, that was further down my point, but I always had that mindset in my head that like, good things were going to happen to me no matter what. So yeah.
Having that support system, and to encourage you along the way, like, even if you run into some hiccups and roadblocks, for them to say, hey, Mike, you're talented, you have what it takes, we're behind you, keep going, because the opportunities eventually will happen. I can't tell you, without my mom, I would not even be where I am. And I'm not saying I'm anywhere special, really, but I'm just saying, like, if you have
oh, come on, man, you're a national radio anchor. Don't beat yourself up. You're doing pretty well for yourself, man. You're working for IMG and UCLA, man. You're doing pretty well for yourself.
And you know what's cool about that is, we're doing our first show on Tuesday. I was worried that we weren't going to have a fall calendar, because the Pac-12 is on a hiatus right now, but we're having on like athletes through Zoom interviews, and then we're going to play it on the show on Tuesday. So we're going to have an opportunity to highlight the athletes in a way where it's not just talking about, and I think sometimes, in this might be something you thought about in your mind as well, without the games and the reacting to the games this fall, at least right now, it lends itself to having to be a little bit more creative with how you structure shows. And it can actually be a little bit more entertaining, because I think, Mike, that there's a monotony to like, okay, talking about a game, X's and O's, okay, looking ahead, previewing that game. It's like over, rinse, repeat. It's like, now you can really get into some storytelling and get into some stuff that can really make you stand out, right? Is that kind of how you feel too?
No, exactly. I'll tell you, in the last 6 months, we've done some of our best shows, period. Like, and some of the content that we've been able to generate, whether it be having a great guest on, and every great radio host, sometimes when you have to be creative, those are the best shows. The layup shows where you have like breaking news, sometimes they're easy to prepare for, but it's also like, okay, you're kind of just going through the motions. But like, in terms of like the last 6 months, like, I had so much fun doing this, in terms of like, producing just different things. And you would think, like, with no sports, there wouldn't be anything going on. We were spending so long talking about the NFL draft and what Justin Herbert was going to do. Mm-hmm. And then we went from there, and we started talking about, okay, are we going to have a season? Is this going to happen? Like, all these elements. And then it got to be like, even like these guys opting out, and like these fascinating stories about these guys, the players uniting for We Are United and Big Ten United and We
Right.
Want to Play. Just seeing all those developments in this offseason, like we were talking to a couple of insiders, like Stuart Mandel said, this is the busiest offseason that I've ever been a part of. And it's like,
Wow.
you would think that with no sports, this would be so difficult, but you've seen it with the news and the way everything's changed. And even on just the different level in terms of like, okay, we've got to get creative. We've got to talk about some other elements on the Pac-12 side. Like we spent a good portion of one of our shows this week talking about Lou Dort from the OKC
I love
Thunder.
it. From Arizona State.
Arizona State. And we were talking about how he outplayed offensively James Harden in Game 7. And ultimately his shot got blocked by James Harden. So it's like the Arizona State ties there. So we spent a good chunk of time on our show just recently about, because that game happened, I think, Wednesday. So we spent our Thursday show talking about it. So it's just like, you're so right in saying like, hey, sometimes it's easy to produce a show when you know what's going to happen. Like when NFL comes back, okay, Sunday, we know what we're talking about. All these games. What did Baker Mayfield? I'm a Browns fan. What did Baker Mayfield do in his first game? Or what did Tom Brady do in his first start with the Bucs? That's easy. But sometimes you get so much more fulfillment out of doing shows that like you have to challenge yourself. And I love that about being a producer. I love that about just being able to generate content. I have great hosts and I have great people who I collaborate with all the time on my channel. And we have a great team over in the college department. We have 5 Power 5 channels and we've got ESPNU, which is the national network. We've got a great team. And it's obviously been challenging, but I think in a lot of ways that's kind of what makes us strong, what makes us better in terms of like, because, hey, I'm able to produce a show because there was a 4-month period. There was no sports. I mean, you had golf and you had UFC. So like, I love that about this job in terms of like, being able to like challenge myself and do different things rather than, hey, okay, there's no football or there's going to be football this weekend. And okay, we've got a box score. And okay, this is what happened in the game. This is what Coach Herm Edwards said after the game. It's like, that's great. And we can react to it. But like generating topics sometimes, that's in a lot of great talent will tell you the same thing too.
Well, when you ask a head football coach about talking about their upcoming opponent, they'll always finish it by saying, it'll be a tremendous challenge for us. And that stuff. Yeah, exactly. The cliches, the monotony, like you said, it's great to have games. We love that, but it's not like you couldn't do it without it. And there was, like you said, such a trepidation over how are you supposed to fill time when you don't have sports? Well, first of all, you've got sports news. You've got a lot of sports news. And as the analysts and those who have been a part of your show have pointed out, it's been a busy off season for that kind of news. So there's been a whole lot of content. And then at Fox Sports Radio, the podcast numbers have been through the roof while there have been no sports. People want sports. Even if it's not games, they want people to talk about them. And so it's not like it can't be done. And I would have to say, Mike, as I kind of wrap it up, like if you can survive what we survived, and I think the worst is behind us, then what can't you do as far as a radio personality? I think that it gives you such a grasp of confidence. Like, man, if I went that long without having to react to a game and I made intriguing content, there's a whole lot more I can do. I think it's just kind of like a way to kind of stick your chest out and be proud of yourself.
Yeah, no, I embrace it 100%. And the fact that I was able to power through one of the most difficult times in the world and be able to power through. I'm grateful that I've been able to power through with a job and be able to still be able to put content on the air, whether it be taped or we've been live for the last 2 weeks. The fact that we've been able to continuously work from home and stay safe, the investment that they've made at SiriusXM. I can't say enough about that company for what they've been able to give me. Like, I'm obviously grateful for everything that I had at Fox Sports Radio, but it's just like this, like the faith that they're having in us to do a 3-hour show with no sports, like that's that's because we've been able to do so well in the last, and our bosses have been blown away by the content that we've been able to do on the college side without sports. Because once March Madness got shut down, there hasn't been anything until this week with college football. Like, so in terms of college athletics, it's even more challenging. At least
good point.
At least on Fox Sports Radio, you guys have had NFL off season, and we naturally, that's what usually drives the conversation. And now you've got the playoffs and the bubble and the NHL and UFC and tennis now. And I know you're a big tennis guy, so like you just have
more.
So it's just more involvement. So like to be able to power through like the challenges, and obviously we were much more limited in terms of shows. Like they gave us 1 hour shows or 2 hour shows to just help us get through. But I'm really proud of the effort that we've put in, even without any sports. And it's kind of just led me into like being like, okay, I've been so committed to doing my stuff that it's kind of led me into the efforts that I've been putting on my podcast and just talking about wrestling. So like, it's made me a lot more like rounded in terms of like, okay, how much, like I've always been putting great effort into it, but it's really challenged me in terms of like, okay, what can we talk about? And then, like I said, it's just kind of translated into what I'm doing on the side with my podcast, which I'm hoping that, I know wrestling isn't the thing, but I love talking about it. I had Jonas on my podcast. It's like there is an interest in that. So that's why I kind of carried that on too. So like just all of it kind of ties together in terms of, okay, you're thinking about like all these things that you want to put on the air and be challenged with. And like I said, obviously with no sports, I kind of naturally just gravitated to wrestling because I've always been a fan. And like with no sports, I was like obviously paying way more attention to. So yeah, why not talk about it for 20 minutes at a time? So
Mike Mayer, he might be on channel 373. I think his IQ is higher than that. He is showing you the importance of mentally stimulating your mind, and he's done that in a big way. And if you follow him on Twitter, Off the Mic 28, you can figure out how to listen to that aforementioned podcast, OT Mike Wrestling. He has
Off the Mic Wrestling podcast. Yeah.
Off the Mic Wrestling. Yeah. So, and that's in your bio. So everybody get over to Mike's Twitter page, go follow him, and then also listen to his podcast. He breaks it down, and his career is just headed for super stardom. Thanks again, Mike, for doing this. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. I can't wait for the time when we can meet in person and it's not virtually, but given the times, it has been a treat.
Yes, this has been fun. Let's do it again.